Day after day, throughout this nation and throughout the world, people speak, write, debate, vote on the contentious issue of abortion. And yet for most people, this is no more than a word. For most people, this is no more than a concept. And very often the concept they have when they hear the word bears almost no resemblance to the horrifying reality. St. Paul says to the Ephesians, "Have no part in the fruitless works of darkness, but rather expose them." This is the judgment, John says in his gospel. The light came into the world, but men loved darkness rather than light. They ran away from the light for fear that their deeds would be exposed. But those who love the Lord run towards the light. And that's what we're doing here tonight. We're giving meaning to a word that has practically lost all its meaning. We're exposing the fruitless works of darkness. We are shining the light on a tragedy which, unless it is exposed, simply will not end. One of the members of our pastoral staff at Priests for Life is Dr. Alveda King, niece of Martin Luther King Jr. She marches with us in the pro-life marches. She speaks full-time on this issue. She travels coast to coast. She has been with baby Abel in ceremonies like this. When I first marched with her in Washington at the annual March for Life, I said to her as we were going up Constitution Avenue towards the Supreme Court, I said, "Does this remind you of the civil rights movement and the marches with your uncle?" And she turned to me and she said, "Father Frank, this is the civil rights movement." We're talking about real people really suffering. And Dr. King, of course, caused all kinds of controversy as he went around the country fighting segregation. Controversy that got him and others thrown in jail. Hopefully you're quite familiar with his letter from the Birmingham jail. Do you know why he wrote that letter? In which he defended the activism and the protests and the very heart and core of the thirst for justice and the struggle for equality that he and his people underwent. Do you know why he had to write that letter sitting in jail in the city of Birmingham, Alabama? Because 8 people signed a letter saying to him that the protests were untimely, unproductive, and in fact wrong. And sadly, those 8 people who signed that letter were all members of the clergy. Clergymen who thought that Dr. King was just causing a little bit too much trouble, too much division. In fact, that he was even fomenting violence. Because after all, if you just let things be, people won't decide to resort to violence in order to end the problem of segregation. Dr. King's response is as valid today as it was then, and it is as applicable to the fight against abortion as it was to the fight against segregation. He said, "It is not we who are fomenting violence. We are simply exposing to the natural light of human conscience a division and a violence that is already there. And unless it is exposed to the light of human conscience, the problem will never be solved."